Alright guys, so welcome back to chapter 54. This is part 6 and the final part to this chapter. And chapter 54 kind of wraps up with just talking a little bit about pathogens and their influence on communities. And what we're seeing as we're really starting to take notice to pathogens and their effects and study them across different communities is that they really sort of have a universal effect. And that effect can be dramatic and quick and extensive to what they do to the community structures that they come into, particularly if it's a new community that this pathogen is introduced to itself, because those organisms haven't evolved to be resistant to these new pathogens. So, just an example, the coral reef communities are being devastated by this white band disease, where it's coming in and just killing off corals. So not only are we having issues with what we're doing from a sort of global climate issue, coral bleaching and all of that, but now they're getting affected by these diseases as well. And so it's something that I think we're going to see more and more of from an ecological standpoint, studying these diseases, studying their effects, and what ways we might be able to prevent some of their destruction, because they get in there and they have huge effects. And it's also coming from the fact that our globe sort of is shrinking in a sense, that we as humans are picking up and being able to get across the entire globe in 24 hours. And so we're taking regional diseases, regional pathogens, and spreading them across the globe, putting them into new ecosystems that they wouldn't have otherwise gotten to if we weren't able to kind of just get on a plane and take it with us. All right. So community ecology is really sort of starting to understand the need to studying these pathogens and how to combat them. And not just from an ecological standpoint and what's going on to say maybe our plants or animals living out in the world, but also to us. All right, we're seeing a huge number of what they're calling zoonotic pathogens. And those pathogens are getting transferred from animals to us. All right, and that transfer can be either direct, some sort of interaction with the animal that pathogen typically infects, and typically that animal has evolved a way to resist it, all right, or at least have less of an impact. Versus us as humans, we're sort of that new frontier for this organism. We haven't figured out how to, as a species, be resistant to it. Or it can come through some sort of vector, so some sort of intermediary species. The Ebola scare is one of the things that we're looking at. We think its sort of host animal is bats, but it's not necessarily the bats that are directly getting that to us. It's other intermediary species, monkeys and that sort of thing. Bushmeat is a big deal that they're worried about over in Africa, because it can get transferred through that meat that humans are going out into the forest and hunting gorillas and monkeys and things, which is typically frowned upon, but it happens. All right, and so it's getting transferred that way. HIV, same idea. Swine flu, Lyme disease. These are all zoonotic diseases that CDC is really starting to spend a lot of time looking at, trying to understand, trying to combat. All right, and the more that we can help to identify the hosts and the vectors of all of these diseases, the better we are at being able to not only study them, but then combat them, and not just for our own needs, although that's probably where most of the funding will go first, but also for our agricultural crops, and then just sort of species in general. All right, we'll come back to some of this idea when we get to some of the immunology and microbiology and stuff a little later this year. But this particular field is one that I think is pretty fascinating. And so if you'd like some more information on other resources to take a look at, let me know. I'll pass along a couple of books. I've been spending some time reading some stuff on this. I just think it's kind of interesting. So let me know if you are interested, and I'll pass along some resources. All right, that's the end of chapter 54.